I have $150,000 saved for retirement. When can I retire? Well, that's what we're going to look at today on the channel, because if you look at the average saved for retirement, we're going to look at age 50. We are not that far off of what the average saved in retirement savings is. So it's a pretty good chance that you might be close to 50 or a little bit over 50 and have $150,000 saved for retirement. You ready to get into this? Let's go. All right, so I've got Tim. Tim's from Idaho, and I'm calling this the David versus Goliath scenario because Tim has done everything right when it comes to saving. Now, I know you might be thinking, Drew, he only has $150,000 saved for retirement. Well, Tim has had some curveballs thrown his way in life. He's gone through a divorce. He's also worked really hard to have zero debt. So he has a $250,000 home with zero mortgage. So most of his money has been going towards the home to pay off the debt and not to his retirement savings. And again, he went through a divorce, and anytime you go through a divorce, and you might know this, the assets get split and it's really hard to get back on your feet, but he's done it. So we're 50 years old. We have $150,000 saved for retirement. We have a salary of $85,000 gross per year. Social Security at 67 is going to be $2,658, so $2,658. Now that's at his full retirement age. So if he claims Social Security at 67, he's going to get 100% of his full retirement benefit. We'll talk a little bit more about Social Security as we get through the scenario. His contribution to his 401k right now is 10%. He's putting 10% of his $85,000 into his 401k. He's getting a 3% match from his company on the 401k. So about 13% is going into his 401k. Now, a good rule of thumb is you want to be saving somewhere between 10 and 15% of your gross annual salary every year for retirement, whether that's in a 401k, an IRA, a 403b. Maybe you do a mixture of 5% into your 401k to get your company match and another 5% into a Roth IRA, or 5% into your 401k and 5% into a brokerage account. Whatever it might be, you want to save somewhere between 10 and 15% of your gross. Now for Tim, he's been doing 10%, and he's getting a 3% match, so that puts us at 13%. So we're right where we want to be. I would like to get it to 15 to 20%, but we're working with what we're at right now. And again, he's doing a really good job. So we have a $250,000 home, and there's no debt. Okay, now Tim, when he got divorced, he took on a mortgage and he took on some credit card debt. And so because of that, he really wanted to work himself out of the hole before he started to save for retirement. That was just his thought process, and now we've met and we're going to work through getting him to retirement, through retirement, and protect his ability to stay in retirement. So we've got $150,000 saved for retirement, and this is inside of his 401k. He does have about $10,000 in the bank, okay? Now, he's 50 years old, and he's asking the question, when can I retire? He understands that he cannot retire at 55. He's not going to retire at 60. He might not even retire at 65. He's just asking the question, Drew, when can I retire based on conservative projections? If we get market returns of 8, 9, 10, 15%, that's great. Maybe I can retire earlier. But what about some conservative market projections so that I can really answer the question, can I retire? So we've got a 5% and a 3% over on this side. And over here, we're going to have his salary net with taxes and contribution and his expenses. Okay? So what we're looking at is a couple different things. We're 50 years old and we have $150,000 saved. We're going to look at a 5% rate of return on the money in the stock market. So the $150,000 in his 401k, we're going to project out a 5% rate of return. Now, I realize that that is very low. And what I would much rather him do at 50 in his 401k, understanding that we're probably going to have to work 10, 15, 20 years, is to put that money in the S&P 500, a very simple S&P 500 index fund, 100% try to grow it as much as possible. Now, the S&P 500, the last 50 years, has averaged about 10%. It's 8% with inflation. So we are projecting 3% lower than what I'm actually recommending that he does in his 401k. And the reason that we are projecting it at a lower level is because I want to be conservative in our projections. Obviously, if things change as we update the EKG for Tim, we can make changes to his retirement plan. But if we project low and it comes in high, we're going to high five and chest bump. But if we project high and it comes in low, he's going to try to put my head on a stick somewhere, right? So we need to make sure that we're doing this in a conservative fashion. Now listen, if you would like a financial EKG, all the information is in the description below. Visit our website. We'd love to help you. So we're looking at a 5% rate of return for the money in the market. We're going to look at 3% inflation. So we're going to put inflation on his expenses, right? Because you know your expenses go up whether you working or not. We talk a lot about on this channel retired, people who are retired and looking at inflation. But listen, I'm working. I went to Costco the other day. I see inflation. The Fed might not see inflation, but I do. And so our expenses are going to have inflation on it too, and we're going to look at 3% for the rest of his life. So his income is $4,700 net. Now, let me explain net to you. Net is after taxes, so state, local, federal, after FICA, Social Security, after Medicare, okay? So that's net plus his contribution of 10%. So $4,700 net is what we're looking at. Net minus expenses is $1,275. So this is what we have left over at the end of each month. Now, I'm not saying that he can't take that money that's left over at the end of each month and repurpose that back into maybe a brokerage account or maybe into a Roth IRA or something like that. But what I would like to see Tim do is to build up his bank account. I don't believe that's enough. What if his AC goes out? That wipes out the $10K pretty quick, right? What if he needs a new car? That wipes out the $10K pretty quick. What I'd like to see Tim do, now that he's really worked hard to be debt-free, is to protect himself, protect his debt freedom by building up his emergency fund. You know, Dave Ramsey has it right. You want to build up this emergency fund. I'd like to see 12 to 24 months in emergency fund savings, because who knows what the future holds. Now, that doesn't mean it has to sit in the bank and earn 0.01. You can put it in a high yield money market. You can, once you build this up, siphon a little bit off, put it into a CD or put it into something that's going to earn some interest. But I just want to see, as a single person, would like to see him build up his emergency fund. And once that gets built up, then we can repurpose some of that money back into the overall market. So from 50 to 60, now we are really working hard because he just paid off his house. We've gotten rid of all the debt. We want to grow these assets. So from 50 to 60, our $150,000 grows to $437,675. That's a lot of money. Contributions, rates of return, we're doing pretty good. Now at 60, we have $437,675. Now the thing that's not going to change for Tim are his expenses. So we've got his expenses kind of down to the bare bone. And keep in mind, there's one expense for Tim that's really expensive, and that's health insurance. And so because of the cost of health insurance, Tim is going to work to age 65, kind of like no matter what, because he doesn't want to pay for health insurance on the exchange. So we know we're going to work to somewhere right here at a minimum, because his expenses are kind of bare boned and he doesn't want to add $800 to $1,000 a month in health insurance. So $437,675 is where we're at today, or at 60. We've got the same rate of return. 5% is our rate of return and 3% is our inflation number. So our income, $5,120 is our net income. We're growing our income about 1%. So he sees about a 1% raise every year. Our expenses have gone up by 3%, $4,724. So look at that. Expenses went from $3,425 to $4,724. His income went from $4,700 to $5,120. So now, each month, we're only saving $396. You see that? That's inflation, right? His income is not outpacing inflation, even inflation at 3%. And so, 60 to 70, at 70 we have $802,603. Now, I'm not saying Tim's going to work till 70. He's 50. This is 20 years from now. Like, I'm 38, 48, 50. I don't even know where I'm going to be at 58 years old. I mean, probably going to be doing this, but like, who knows? Who knows where the market's going to be? So when we look at this, we might be able to retire earlier depending on what market rates of return do. So we always have to be thinking about that. Again, look at this, 150 to 802. And I want to encourage you, if you're younger, if you're watching this in your 30s and 40s, Tim's making $85,000 a year. He gets a 1% increase on his salary. He's putting 10% into his contribution into his 401k. He gets a 3% match. And do you see what compound interest did over 20 years? That's God's greatest gift outside of Jesus, compound interest. You name something that's a greater gift than compound interest outside of Jesus, and I'll talk to you, but that's pretty darn good. So 802, 603 at 70. Now what we're going to do at 70 is we're going to ratchet down our rate of return. It's going to 4%. And the reason we're going to go to 4% is because now that we've retired, we want to be a little bit more conservative. We want our investment allocation to correctly position ourselves so that we're not facing the volatility. I call it the Walt Disney World Railroad versus Space Mountain. If you've ever been on any roller coaster, you know as soon as you get on, like, this is going to be terrifying or thrilling, however you feel about roller coasters. You know you're going to get off, but you don't really know how you're going to get there. And Space Mountain at Disney World, it's in the dark. And you feel like you're flying. Now, it's only going like 35 miles an hour, but in the dark with the sounds, you feel like, oh my gosh, I'm in space and I'm flying. You just don't know where you're going to get off. What we want to do is transition from Space Mountain to the Walt Disney World Railroad. Like, we know we're getting off at Main Street. We know we're getting off at Tomorrowland. We know we're getting off at Frontierland. Like, we know we're getting off at these stops. It's set up. And we want to do that. Now, we're not giving up growth in retirement because we need our assets to last forever, but we just want to be more, what's the word I'm looking for? We want to be more consistent with our overall returns when it comes to retirement investing. Now, inflation's going to stay the same. We're going to keep that at 3%. And so if you look at this, now we're flip-flopping because this is adding money. Now we're taking money out. So now our expenses are the top number, where they were the bottom number before. Our expenses are our top number, and Social Security is kicking on at 70. Now, Tim's going to take Social Security at 70, which is $3,295. So I know what most of you are thinking, or maybe some of you are thinking, why didn't he take it at 67 and invest it? You know, when we looked at the projections of taking the money out and investing it, it didn't make sense at this point. Here's a reason why. If you take your Social Security and you're age 67 or your full retirement age, you can take it and make as much money working as you want. A lot of people or a lot of financial advisors will tell you to take it, or money people on YouTube will tell you to take it and invest it. But when you take it out of Social Security and you invest it, is that return guaranteed? No, it's not. And you might say, well, he could put it in a high yield money market. Making what, 4%? Maybe 4 to 5, that's great. But if he leaves it in Social Security, he's going to get an 8% gain every year. Tim's single, okay? At this point, he might meet somebody, but he's single. And we want to maximize his Social Security payment because it's on me, myself, and I, right? His Social Security income's on me, myself, and I. So if we can get to 70, he's going to get 124% of his overall Social Security benefit. So at 67, you get 100% of your Social Security benefit. If you claim at 62, you get 70%. But if you wait until 70, you get 124%. That's pretty darn good, right? So $65.18 is his expenses, $32.95 is his Social Security. So his retirement income need is $3,223. This is what has to come out of his portfolio. That's what's got to come out of this 802. And so if we do that for 10 years, at 70 he's at $800,000. At 80 we're at $390,000. We're almost down. We're basically down about $410,000. That's a big drop between 70 and 80, and we're essentially out at 85. Now again, I'm using a very conservative 4% projection. Now, there are some things that Tim can do to help make this better. Budget. He can look at his budget. He's very good at his budget. Can we increase our contribution? Can we increase our contributions? That's one of the things he can do. Keep in mind, he's got this excess money, but I'd like him to build up this bank. Really want to see this get built up. But if he wants to get it to maybe 15, 20,000, start chucking more money into his 401k and we can see more growth. Obviously, we're going to invest this 401k more towards the S&P 500, so we're not going to probably get the 5% that we're projecting. We're probably going to get 7, 8%. And we've talked through some of those numbers and what that would look like, and he might be able to retire earlier doing that, and the money's going to last a little longer. Again, I don't want to guarantee anything, so I'm going to come in on the low side. That's a couple things he could do. Now, another thing that he can think about doing is he can look at working part-time. Oh, I know I just said something that's going to like throw everybody into a tizzy, because he's literally working till 70. Tim's a pretty handy guy. He's actually very handy. He could do things that I only wish I could do with a screwdriver. So he could work part-time in retirement. He could be a handyman. Or one of the things that we talked about was retiring earlier from his current job, maybe at that 65 level, and working as a handyman, making less, and doing that longer. So that's something that we can look at in the EKG. So what if he retired at 65 and we said, okay, from 65 to 75, you're gonna do part-time work, doing your handyman stuff. So instead of stopping at 70, we're gonna stop at 65, which means the 401k contributions are gonna stop. But if he's self-employed, we can start putting money into another investing vehicle, and we're gonna do that a little bit longer. So there's things that we can work through to make sure this works for Tim. Keep in mind, 85 at 0, male mortality table right now is 84. Now, I hope he lives to 100. And we also have the house, right, that's appreciating. We're showing a 1% projection on the house. And the only reason I use 1% is because in Idaho, I have no idea what the real estate market's going to do in Idaho. I live in Florida. I have no idea what the real estate market in Florida is going to do. So we put a 1% projection on the house. So if we get to 80, right, we can do a reverse mortgage, sell the house, we could rent, move into independent living. So there's a lot of things that he can do to make sure that this money doesn't run out, okay? So I hope this video has helped you. David versus Goliath. I've got $150,000 saved. When can I retire? Thank you so much for watching. God bless. Bye-bye. How to retire on $100,000 in retirement savings. That's what we're going to talk about today, because think about this. The average saved for retirement from ages 45 to 54 is $179,000. The average saved for retirement at ages 55 to 64 is $256,000. Now, you and I know that averages are skewed because you have a lot of large numbers at the top, a lot of zeros at the bottom, and that skews the overall average. So let's look at the median, because that's a better indicator of what Americans have saved for retirement. The median saved for retirement from ages 45 to 54 is $61,500, much less than $179,000 average. The median from age 55 to 64 is $89,700, which is a lot less than the $256,000 average for ages 55 to 64. And think about these statistics. Only 14% of Americans have $100,000 saved for retirement. 78% of Americans have less than $50,000 saved for retirement. And out of that $100,000 saved for retirement, that 14%, 9% of those are men and 5% of those are women. So how can you retire with $100,000? That's what we're going to look at. We're going to look at a couple different scenarios. We're going to look at the average expenses for someone in retirement who's single. So we're going to see, can they retire with $100,000? Then we're going to look at what your expenses need to be to retire with $100,000. And then we're going to put the two together to make a better plan to retire with $100,000 in retirement savings. All right, so let's get to the first scenario. So the first scenario is I'm single, I have $100,000 saved for retirement, I'm 60 years old, can I retire? how can I retire? So we have $100,000 and $3,000 is our monthly expenses. That's $36,000 a year. Now keep in mind the average retirement expenses are about $52,000 a year. That's for a couple. So we're going to break this down for someone who's single. Now we're going to take a couple assumptions into our projection. The first assumption is our $100,000 is in the market and it is going to get a rate of return. Now keep in mind, if $100,000 is what you have saved for retirement and you are going into what we call distribution mode, meaning you're going to use your retirement assets for retirement income. And it doesn't matter if you have $100,000 saved or $1 million saved for retirement. This holds true. We want to protect that money because that has become our distribution source for retirement income. So we're going to take a few assumptions. The first assumption is going to be that our money in the market is going to earn a rate of return of 5%. And the reason I'm going to use 5% is because that's even more conservative than I normally use. I usually use 6% as a rate of return because the market over the last 50 years has averaged 10%. It's actually averaged 15% over the last decade. But over the last 50 years, it's averaged 10%. 8% if you factor in inflation. So I usually use 6, but we're going to go to 5. We're going to take one step back because I see your comments saying, Drew, the market's not going to average what it has. So let's back off our projections. Now, the second projection we're going to use is 3% for inflation. Now, I realize that inflation is running hot, and I realize that inflation will probably run hot for the next decade or so. But the mean for inflation is 3%. That's the 109-year average. So we're going to use 3% as our inflation rate because let me be honest, in a 20, 30, 40-year retirement, your inflation is not going to be at 7, 8, 9%. If it is, then we are all up the creek without a paddle, if you know what I mean. All right, so $3,000 is our expenses. We're 60 years old. We're going to take Social Security at 62. And our Social Security at 62 is going to be $1,960. That's kind of the average Social Security check today. So we're going to use $1,960. That's the average at 62. And so that's going to give us a good reading on what should we claim Social Security at 62, 67, or 70. Remember, if you claim Social Security at 62, you're only going to get 70% of your full retirement benefit. And that's where the majority of Americans claim Social Security based on statistics. Now, if you claim Social Security at 67, you're going to get 100% of your full retirement benefit. And if you wait till 70, if you're an overachiever, if you are a broccoli eater, maybe you are a weight lifter, then you're going to get 124% of your full retirement benefit. And that is the smallest percentage of Social Security claims in this country. So we're going to use $1,960 for Social Security. But here's the thing. From 60 to 62, our $100,000, taking out $3,000 a month, which is $36,000 a year, with inflation, goes to $28,189 at 62. And we are out of money at 64, even including in Social Security. So this is not a good scenario. Can I retire at 60 with $100,000 and $3,000 in expenses? No, ma'am. No, sir, you cannot. So we need to say, okay, what can we? How can we retire? That's what the comments always say. Drew, how can they retire? Not can they, how can they? Okay, let's put in practical steps to assume how can we retire? So we're 60 years old. $100,000 is our retirement savings. We're going to use the same projections for our retirement rate of return of 5% and our retirement inflation of 3%. 5 and 3%. Again, we're going to use the same projections. Now, we have to figure out what amount of expenses can we have that's going to last till our late 80s, early 90s? What's going to give us the most extension on our retirement income? Because $3,000 didn't do it. We were out at 64. We lasted 4 years in retirement. That's not what we want. So now, based on calculations, our expenses need to be $1,900 with inflation. Because that number could be higher. The $1,900 could be higher, meaning you could take more than $1,900 out of your retirement assets for retirement income.
but we're factoring in inflation. And so keep in mind, inflation doesn't work on like an annual basis and, oh my gosh, prices just went up after 1 year. No, inflation happens daily. Inflation happens. You go to Costco, I go to Costco. Raspberries today are more expensive than they were last month. And so we need to calculate inflation on a monthly basis. So $1,900 is going to be our expenses with inflation. So from 60 to 62, we're taking out $1,900 per month. At 62, we have $72,139 in retirement savings. So our $100,000's gone down by about $28,000 to $72,000. Now, we're kicking on Social Security at 62. That's that 1960 number. And our expenses have grown from 1,900 to 2,059, right? That's inflation, right? Compound interest is God's greatest gift outside of Jesus. It works on the plus side when you're contributing to your 401k, your IRA, your taxable brokerage account, but it also works on the negative side with inflation, compound interest, right? So 2,059 is our new expenses. Social Security, we're turning on 70% of our full retirement benefit, $1,960, which means we got to take out right at about $100 from our retirement savings with inflation to live off of, right? Because our Social Security doesn't cover all of our expenses. 5% is our rate of return, 3% is inflation. At 72, we got $88,415. And essentially at 92, we go to zero. So this is a way, how can I retire with $100,000 at 60? You can keep your expenses really low, and that's going to put you out at 92. And you might be thinking, well, Drew, who can do that in America? Not a lot of people, but I got a lot of clients who've moved to the Philippines. They've moved to Mexico, they moved to Thailand, they moved to other countries. And so they can actually keep their expenses low and retire on less. And that might be an option for you. If you want to retire with less in your retirement savings, you might have to move overseas. Now, we have done an EKG for this client to make sure it works for them. And listen, if you want an EKG for you, in the description below is how you get in contact with me. Let's work through your retirement to build you out a financial EKG to get you to retirement, through retirement, and protect your ability to stay in retirement. But let's assume this person wants to stay in the States. They've got grandkids, they've got friends, whatever, they want to stay in the States. So there's things that we have to think about. One of the things we got to think about is, would we be willing to work longer? Maybe we don't retire at 60. Maybe we continue contributing to our 401k or IRA. We work a couple years longer, take Social Security at the time we retire, whether that's 62, 64, 65, whenever. Another option for someone who's burnt out, maybe you just don't want to work anymore at your current job, you've been putting in 40, 50 hours, is to work part-time. And that's what most of my clients do. They work part-time. They don't continue working at their current job. They work part-time. I'm working with a client right now. He works for a Fortune 500 company. He is burnt out. But we're talking about, hey, when you retire, let's work part-time a little bit to help supplement your income. Remember, we've done the EKG, so we know exactly based on projections when they're going to run out of money. And so I can say, hey, maybe if you work part-time just a little bit, doing something you enjoy, then this is going to extend the life of your retirement income, which is what we want. So working longer, working part-time, living on a budget. If you retire and you haven't saved enough for retirement, you've got to really make sure you're living on a budget. You understand your spending. You understand what the inflows and the outflows are, and you live on that budget. It doesn't leave you a lot of room for emergencies like an HVAC, a new roof, a new car. But that's just what it is. And so that's why I have a lot of clients that move overseas, because the expenses are so much less if you haven't saved what the experts say you need to save for retirement. I'm not saying you can't retire with $100,000. I'm just saying it's going to take some work in order to do that. Okay. So let's look at a scenario where we incorporate some of these ideas to let this person retire at 60 with $100,000, but to give them a little bit more confidence going forward. All right, let's look at one more scenario. How can I retire with $100,000 in retirement savings? And I want to add in some factors that will help you retire earlier if you haven't saved enough for retirement. So let's look at this. Let's go through the first scenario and then let's look at the finished product. So the first scenario is retiring with $100,000. We've got $3,000 in expenses and basically we're out of money at 64. So now the thought process is, how can I retire? We know we can't retire with $100,000 in retirement savings, $3,000 in monthly expenses, or $36,000 in annual retirement expenses. So how can we do it? So we calculated that the least amount of expenses, or the most amount of expenses that we can have to make our retirement income last the longest, is $1,900 with inflation. So that's where we're going to start. So we've got $100,000 in retirement savings. Our retirement expenses are $1,900 per month. Okay, very low. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to throw in some part-time work of $500 a month. Okay, that's basically what, $6,000 a year in extra income. It's about $12.50 an hour if you calculate it out on a 40-hour work week. So it's a simple thing to do, especially if you're just trying to work part-time. Now, our rate of return is going to be 5%, and inflation is going to be 3%. So our expenses are going to grow at 3%. Our money in the market is going to grow at 5%. Our Social Security will have a COLA on it as well. We're going to collect that at 62. Now it's going to be 70% of our full retirement benefit, but we're going to collect it early because we want to turn off the spigot on our retirement income. Basically, pulling money out of your retirement assets is like turning on a faucet, right? The water's coming out of the faucet. Now, depending on how much you need is how hard that water's coming out, right? It could be spewing out or it could be dripping out. And so what we want to do is kind of try to get that spigot to dripping as much as possible. So turning on Social Security, which is a guaranteed annuity payment backed by the full faith and credit of the United States government, is going to help us turn the faucet on our retirement income. So from 60 to 62 with $1,900 in expenses, but working $500 and getting $500 a month for part-time work means we're going to need $1,400 per month out of our investments, which puts us at $80,257 in retirement assets at 62. Now, here's what we're going to do. We're going to claim Social Security at 62 of 1960. We're going to continue to work. Now, our work now has gone from $500 a month to $510. We're getting a 1% increase just based on, averages out there in the nation. And our expenses are $2,059. That's grown by 3%. Right? Our work's grown by 1%. It could be more than 1%. And now we've kicked on Social Security. Now, let me take a little caveat here. If you start working and collecting Social Security at the same time, there is a threshold that you want to make sure you do not go over in collecting Social Security and working income. Now, once you get to full retirement age, this does not matter. But if you are under 67 and you are working and you make more than what the IRS designates you're allowed to make and claim Social Security, the IRS is going to start taking back $1 for every $2 you make over that threshold. Now, today, that threshold is around $20,000. That is indexed every year with CPI, so it goes up. So make sure if you are working part-time, you're working less than the threshold if you're claiming Social Security, because then you're just paying all these taxes and it doesn't make sense, right? When someone says, oh, collect Social Security and keep working full-time and invest your Social Security check, I'm like, oh my gosh, they don't understand the tax code because it doesn't work unless you're over age 67. And in that case, we're probably already in retirement. Now, $80,257 is what we've got at 62. At 72, our money's actually grown because look, our expenses are $2,059. We're getting $510 for working. $1,900 is our Social Security, or $1,960. That's a good year, right? Plus $411, meaning we're making $411 a month that's being reinvested back into our portfolio. So what I'm assuming is we're taking this $411 and we're reinvesting it back in, or a portion of that back into our retirement savings. So we've grown our retirement assets to $139,536. Now at 72, we stop working. You can keep working. Obviously, if you're 72 and you enjoy your part-time work, keep doing it. I've got a lot of clients who work part-time jobs at Lowe's, Home Depot, wherever, and they enjoy doing it and they keep doing it. All right. So we've got 139. Our expenses have grown to 3,065. You see that? $1,000 basically from age 72, from 62 to 72. Our working income is gone, so that's no longer here in the middle. Social Security has grown from 1960 to 2529. That's just a cost of living adjustment for Social Security. And so now $536 is what has to come out of the portfolio for us to live off of, or about $6,000, a little bit more than $6,000 per year. At 82, we have $117,079. And this portfolio runs out of money late in the 90s. Late in the 90s. So this is how, if you want to retire with $100,000 saved for retirement, you can do that. How can I retire? Now, is this a scenario that's perfect? No. This is a scenario where I would rather the person continue to work full time. Again, there's options. Move overseas, work part-time, lower your expenses. Maybe you've paid off your home so you can keep your expenses lower. But a lot of us, if I live in Tampa, maybe you live in Vegas or Austin, or it's somewhere in New York, Connecticut, and your expenses are higher, so you've got to save a little bit more or make some serious sacrifices to retire with $100,000. That's strictly up to you, all right? Well, hey, thank you so much for watching. God bless. Bye-bye.
Retire with $100,000? Here's how you can do it. That's what we're going to talk about today on the Your Financial EKG YouTube channel. And why am I talking about retiring with $100,000 saved for retirement or less? Well, 65% of Americans have $100,000 or less saved for retirement. All right, so let's talk about 3 ways that you can retire with $100,000 or less, and then we're going to get into the exact scenarios on the board. Number 1, you can work longer. The average retirement age today in America is 64 years old. So if you've got $100,000 or less, you probably need to work a little bit longer to, number 2, maximize your Social Security. Why do you want to maximize your Social Security? Well, if you take Social Security at 62, you get 70% of your full retirement benefit. If you wait until 67, you get 100% of your full retirement benefit. And if you claim at 70, if you're an overachiever, a broccoli and asparagus eater, you get 124% of your full retirement benefit. Now, I'm not telling you that claiming at 70 makes you better than claiming at 62. You have to claim Social Security when it's best for you and your specific and family needs. But if you're wanting to retire with $100,000 or less, it's really important to maximize your Social Security. Maximize. What do I mean by that? Claiming Social Security, making sure that your Social Security income is going to cover the majority of your expenses. And the way to do that is delay claiming. Now, number 3 is think about going overseas. Cut your expenses. If you're wanting to retire with $100,000 or less and the average expenses for a single person is $3,400 and it's $5,500 for a married couple, you have got to cut your expenses if you're thinking about retiring with $100,000 or less, which is why we've talked about possibly going overseas, okay? So let's get into the data right now. Let's go through the scenarios. How can I retire with $100,000 or less? Can I retire at 64 with $100,000 saved for retirement? We're going to look at 2 distinct scenarios. We're going to look for a married couple and we're going to look at a single couple, and we're going to look at some solutions, and we're going to do this in the software. And the reason I want to do it in the software is because this is going to give us a more granular look, a more exact look at this retirement planning. All right? So you ready to do this? Let's go. So we've got Steve and Shirley Justice, and they are retired. Now, Steve is a janitor and Shirley works in administration. And even though they are retired, we still leave their salaries in here just in case we need to think about working longer. Steve was making $55,000 and Shirley was making $42,000 in their respectable jobs. Now, Social Security for Steve at 64 would be $1,703. For Shirley at 64, it would be $1,622. Now, we are going to project a 2.58% COLA increase. Now, if you look at COLAs, they've been taking COLAs on Social Security since 1975. So the 49-year average for COLA is 3.71%. The 10-year average, so the last 10 years, is 2.58. And you can see COLA's not guaranteed. Look at this year in 2016. That was a 0% COLA. 2010, 2011, 0% COLA. Now, many of you might say, well, Drew, inflation didn't go up in those years. That's why there was no cost of living adjustment for Social Security. Yeah, you're right. Inflation didn't go up as much. But healthcare inflation went up. Food and gas went up because those are inflationary expenses that are stripped out when thinking about the cost of living adjustment for Social Security. So I don't know if you don't eat, maybe you don't drive, and maybe you don't go to the doctor. But cost of living adjustments for Social Security are not guaranteed, which is why I'm always more conservative in my planning. Because if it comes out better, we're going to high five and chest bump, and we're going to be good, right? Now, for this couple, there's no pensions. And if we go to assets, here's what we've got. We've got $10,000 in the bank, all right? We've got an IRA of $45,000 for Steve, and we have an IRA for Shirley of $55,000, okay? They have a home that's worth $250,000 and it's paid for, so there's no mortgage on this home. Now, from a rate of return standpoint, we're going to look at a 4.5% rate of return. So, portfolio weighted average, we're looking at 4.27% because the bank's at basically, 2. The rest of the assets are 4.5, so we're a little bit less. Now, from an expense standpoint, we're looking at $3,500 in monthly expenses. So we're in a lower cost state, we're in a lower cost area in that state, so our expenses are less. There's no mortgage, so there's no higher expense there. And so this is giving them a leg up because they paid off their mortgage throughout their working lives. And so that should give you some hope too. These individuals didn't necessarily work in jobs that had tremendous salaries, and they were still able to pay off their home. Now, they were Dave Ramsey. Financial peace is what they went through at their church, and so that's why they were able to do what they did. But it should give you hope that you can pay off your house. You don't have to make $1 million a year to pay off your house. You just have to have the diligence and maybe some sacrifice in order to do that. Now, let's look at retirement. So here's where the rubber meets the road. We're 64 years old. We're taking Social Security, $33.25. So that means with our expenses, you see how these expenses are growing right here? And here's the money that's got to come out of our investments. So here's our investments. We actually grow our money, right? We're growing until right about here. At 73, we start taking $531 a month out of our retirement savings. And so our expenses, our net monthly expenses are $47.13. Our net monthly income is $41.82. That's Social Security. And so now what we're earning, the 4.27%, is not able to keep up with inflation. And essentially we're out of money at 89 years old. Now obviously there are some things we need to look at on this, because we're assuming that both of them are going to live to 89 years old. That's not a good assumption, right? Most men die somewhere around 81, 82. The female dies around 85, 86. Those ages could get extended with healthcare advances, but let's just assume that's where we're at. If Social Security for Steve ends, let's say Steve passes away, Shirley's going to get his Social Security, we're going to lose hers. What's that look like at 81 and 82? That's something that we need to address. It's something that we need to look at in their overall plan. So a thought process for them, there's some solutions. One solution is to work longer. Now, both of them don't have to work longer. What if Steve just works? And I asked Steve one time, I said, Steve, do you mind your job? He works at a school. He goes, no, I don't mind my job. He just wants to get out eventually. I said, well, what if you work an extra year or two? Let's just look at what happens. So we're 64. If we work till, let's say, 67, okay? So now we're not going to take our Social Security at 64 for Steve because he's working. Because if you make more than $20,000, that's kind of the Social Security earnings threshold right now, Social Security is going to carve back $1 for $2 over that you make over that. So for Steve, if he's going to continue to work from 64 to his full retirement age, which is 66 years and 10 months, we need to delay Social Security. So let's take it over to 67. Shirley's still going to take it 64. Okay, now does she need to make him bring in $55,000 with their expenses? Maybe not. So maybe we look at delaying hers. But let's go back first. Let's just look at where we're at, and then let's make some adjustments. So Steve's going to work. We're going to have Social Security for Steve at 67. Shirley's still going to take it at 64. We go to retirement now. Look at this. At 100 years old, we got $21,000 left. So you can see what happened here. We worked 3 extra years. One of the spouses retired. At 67, here's our Social Security income. Steve's is at $21.28 and Shirley's has gone to $17.51 with a cost of living adjustment, and they've grown their assets to $127 by the time that Steve retires. And if we go over to his IRA, we're not even showing him putting any money into his IRA. Now, we could. So what if he put in the contribution? What if he put in, let's just say, well, we got to look. What can we put in? Go to pre-retirement, see if we have any positive cash flow. We have a positive cash flow of $1,649. Why is that? Well, here's our gross monthly salaries. There's him as a janitor, the $4,583. Here's our monthly cash flow, Social Security. So our net monthly income, salary, Social Security, taxes withheld on both, FICA taxes for Steve and Medicare taxes for Steve. So we got $5,177. Our expenses are $35.28, which leaves us with a $1,649 positive cash flow. Basically, all of that positive cash flow is the Social Security. It's like plus $7, right? And so can we, at this point, put some money into our IRA? Well, sure we can. We've got a positive cash flow. So now we can go back to his assets. We can go to his IRA, and let's just put in $250. Okay, now obviously we can max it out, but we're just gonna put $250 in. Now we go to pre-retirement. How does that grow our assets? Look, we're at $128,880. We've grown it to $57,366. So we go to retirement, and we have $56,000 left at 100. Now I'm not saying they're gonna get to 100. Let's go to 85. We've got $211,000. That's pretty good, just him working an extra 3 years. Now, you might say, well, Drew, I don't want to work 3 extra years. Well, what if we just work till 65? Let's get you onto Medicare. So we go to 65. Now, we still want to change our Social Security to taking it when we retire. So we're going to take it at 65 now. Shirley's still going to take it 64. So we're going to save it. We go back to retirement. And look, we're out at 93. So if we retired at 64, we were out at 89. Now we work 1 extra year, just Steve, and we've got to 93. Now, I'm not saying that Steve's the one that has to keep working. Shirley could surely work. That's not a big deal. I'm not trying to say that. What I'm trying to say is, what if we just add an extra year? Now, again, we go back to income. What if we just go to 1 more year, 66? What does that do? We come back down here. We change his Social Security, taking it, let's go 66 and 10 months. That's his full retirement age. We save both. Now we look at it, boom, we're out at 100. Drop the mic. We did it. We're out at 100 years old. Now, obviously, there's some things we've got to look at. Now, they're out at 100. The amount needed today to avoid a shortfall. How much money do they need to put into the portfolio today to never run out of money? $194. They probably have $194 in their house or in the couch cushions, right? The change in their... Does anybody have change anymore? We have change because we have piggy banks for our kids. But does anybody else have change? The rate of return that they need to avoid a shortfall is 4.5%. Remember, we're running this. The rate of return we're running it at is 4.27. So 4.27 is what we're running it at. 4.5 essentially is what they need to never run out of money, meaning they have money at 100. So that's 0.25%. All we need is 0.25% more growth in their market money, and they never run out of money. So you see how we do this? Again, I'm not trying to say you got to have $3 million. Susie Orman says you need $3 million to retire. I don't know what planet Susie Orman lives on, but she doesn't live on my client's planet, because the people that I talk to are hardworking, regular Americans who've had to raise kids, pay off student loans, pay down debt, get laid off, go through financial crises, go through a pandemic. And now they're asking the question, can I retire? And not all of them, Susie, are able to save $3 million. So we have to have a solution for these people. So that's a married couple. Now, let's go through a single scenario. All right, I'm single. I've got $100,000 saved for retirement. Can I retire? That's what we're going to look at in the software today. So I've got Steve. Now, we had Steve and Shirley, but this is a single scenario, so we're not going to have Shirley. We just have Steve. And so Steve is a janitor. He makes $55,000 a year, and he's asking the question, can I retire at 64? Now, he's got Social Security of $1,700. Now, if you look at his Social Security based on his age, now Steve's over here, he was born before 1960, which means his full retirement age is 66 years and 10 months. That's his full retirement age. So if he takes it as full retirement age, he's going to get 100% of his full retirement benefit, $2,100. Okay? Now, from an asset standpoint, we have the bank of $10,000, and Steve's got an IRA of $100,000. So we have $110,000 in retirement savings. We have a house that's worth $250,000 and it's paid off. There's no mortgage on this house. And our rate of return that we're assuming is 4.5%. So 2% the bank, 4.5% for our investments, and 1% for our house. Okay? So we're getting 4.5% until retirement. Let me just adjust these real quick. And we're getting 4.5% after retirement and 2% on our money in the bank. Now, from an expense standpoint, this is where it gets tricky. I'm showing expenses of $3,000. It's hard for me to get lower than that for a single person. Steve's in Indiana. He's in a lower cost state. He's in a lower cost area. But $3,000, that's still pretty low when it comes to just everyday expenses right now. And even as a single person. Maybe you're single and your expenses are less. Put those in the comments. Would love to know that so that when we build out scenarios, we can use you as an example. Now, if we go to retirement, here's where we run into an issue. So we're retiring at 64. Remember, there's no Shirley, it's just Steve. Social Security, $1,700. Our net monthly income, $1,654. That's taxes, net monthly expenses, and yes, there's taxes that we're going to withhold on Social Security. He might get it all back, but we're going to withhold some. Net monthly cash flow is $1,370. Meaning we need $1,370 out of our retirement assets for income. We got $110,000. We're at zero at 71. And here's the hard part. The rate of return that we need to avoid a shortfall is 18.79%. You can't get 18.79% anywhere. That can't guarantee that. The amount needed to avoid a shortfall, $435,000. That's a lot of money that has to be injected into the portfolio. So what do we do? What do we do for Steve? Well, the main solution for Steve is going to be we got to work a little bit longer. And I know you don't like to hear that. And people want me to take pixie dust and put it on this plan and find a solution. But we can't do that. Sometimes we have to give you the truth. The truth will set you free, right? And so in order for us to have the truth is Steve has to work a little longer. So we're going to show him working. Let's go to 67. And let's adjust Social Security to 67. We're going to save Steve here. So Steve, taking Social Security at 67, he's going to work till 67. We're going to go to assets now. We're going to start putting $500 a month into our IRA. That's what we were doing beforehand, but we're going to continue to do that now. We go to retirement, and that only gets us 4 years. Only gets us to 75 years old. So now we got to go back. What if we go to 70? Now we're going to get 124% of our Social Security benefit. Keep in mind, Steve was born before 1960, so his full retirement age is a little less. Is 66 and 10 months. Now, if you were born after the year 1960, your full retirement age is 67. That means you get 100% of your full retirement benefit. If you claim at 62, you get 70% of your full retirement benefit. And if you claim at 70, you get 124%. Now, you can claim at any time between 62 and 70, and you need to claim at a time that makes sense for you. Let's go to retirement now. And essentially, we're out at 81. So now we've got to have some other solutions, right? Well, here are the solutions. At some point, we need to drop these expenses. So can we cut these expenses? What if we cut $200 out? And I'm not saying we do that. I'm just saying that something's got to happen, right? Some sacrifice has to happen for Steve to be able to retire. If we cut expenses to $2,800, that actually gets us 3 years. Now we look at it And maybe we start thinking about this house. Maybe we start thinking about doing a home equity conversion mortgage. Maybe we start doing a reverse mortgage to pull some cash out of this house, because most men die at 84 to 86 years old. Now, again, we don't have any kind of emergency in there. We're just paying basic expenses. So this is a situation as a single person, you have unique challenges that are forcing you to do things that married couples don't have to do. And so this might be a situation where, if you think about it this way, what if Steve, let's go back to, let's say he retired at 64. He's like, I'm tired of the rat race. I don't want to do this anymore. We're going to take Social Security at 64. Let's save it. And what if Steve moved overseas? What if he said, hey, Drew, I'm going to move to the Philippines, where $1,500 is the high side on the average expenses. Remember, 8.6 million Americans live overseas, excluding the military. Okay, I'm not talking about the military. I'm talking about 8.6 million Americans live overseas. So let's say his expenses are $1,500 because he goes to the Philippines. We're still going to put inflation on it, right? There's still inflation in the Philippines. So we're still going to look at inflation. We're retiring at 64. Now, look at that, at 100, we got $552,000. So for Steve, as a single person, there's going to have to be some decisions that he's going to have to make if he wants to retire with $100,000 or less. All right? Well, hey, I hope this has helped. Thank you so much for watching. God bless. Bye-bye. All right, I'm 55 years old. I have $150,000 saved for retirement. I'm single. When can I retire? That's what we're going to go through today on the Your Financial EKG YouTube channel. We've got Jessica. She's 55 years old. She has about $150,000 saved for retirement. She's asking the question, hey, I know I got to work, but when can I retire? And that's what we want to answer for her today, and hopefully give you some inspiration for the future. Because what I want to show you is it doesn't take a lot to get started, but it does take some sacrifice to get where you want to be. So let's look at that right now. Here we go. So we've got Jessica. She's 55 years old. She works in the airline industry. She's got $150,000 saved for retirement. Now, she does have about $10,000 in the bank. So we've got about $160,000 total in retirement savings. Her expenses are $5,000 a month, about $60,000 a year. And those are going to stay right at about $5,000 a month because she refinanced her mortgage. So she's got a 30-year mortgage. It's going to go from 55 to 65 to 75 to 85. So it's going to be around here for the next 30 years, which means she's going to have higher expenses into retirement because of that mortgage payment. Now, her income is $180,000 a year. And this is what we're really going to focus on for Jessica, because she has a high income for a single individual. Now, both her kids are grown at this point. So the reason she hasn't had a lot of savings, she's been through a divorce, she's put kids through college. So now that her kids are gone, we're really going to hammer into her budget and say, okay, Jessica, how much can you save right now so that you can get to retirement? We're going to look at that because life's going to throw us a lot of curveballs, but we need to sit back and see if we can hit those to right field. All right. So here we go. Social Security at 67 is $3,000 a month. She's been a higher earner for most of her career, so full retirement age Social Security is going to be $3,000 a month. Now, she was born after the year 1960, which means her full retirement age is 67, which means she'll get 100% of her Social Security benefit at 67. Now, if she decides to claim earlier, if she retires earlier and claims at 62, 63, 64, 65, or 66, she's going to get a reduced Social Security benefit. Or if we get to 67 and based on market fluctuations or just working longer, she decides to delay her Social Security, she can take it at 68, 69, or 70 for an increased benefit. At 70, she'd get 124% of her full retirement benefits. So that's what we're going to really look at is, when do we want to claim Social Security? How much do we need to save? And what about expenses and inflation and those kind of things? So let's look at this, just what she's doing right now. So she's 55 years old. She's got $150,000. She's putting in $584 a month or $7,000 a year into her IRA. Now, she only has IRAs the way that she is set up at her current job. There are no 401ks or 403bs or any kind of company matches. It's just all on her. So she's putting $584 a month into her IRA. Now, $7,000 a year in retirement savings is not going to be enough to get her to retirement. So we had to look at her budget. We went through an advanced expense plan, and I said, okay, Jessica, now that the kids are gone and you don't have the college expenses anymore because her kids just graduated, how much can you save per month? And when we went through the advanced expense plan within the Your Financial EKG software, we noticed she had about a $6,400 cushion now that the final child is gone off from college. So I said, okay, how much of this $6,400 do you want to invest on a monthly basis? And she said, I want to get as much as I possibly can into savings for retirement. I said, how about $5,000? Let's do $60,000 a year. Let's take the other $1,400 and continue to use that for living, right? Because she's got $180,000 or $15,000 in gross income. After taxes and after we start doing the deductions, we're going to have about $1,400 in cushion. Now, obviously, she can change that $5,000 at any time, but we're just going to use this as a starting point because, again, life can throw us curveballs. We might need to adjust. So we're going to put $5,000 a month, if you can see that, $5,000 a month into her Freedom Fund. And what do I mean by Freedom Fund? Basically, all I mean is taking money and putting it into a taxable brokerage account. Not an IRA, not a SEP IRA, not a Roth IRA. Even though those are great retirement investing vehicles, I want to put this into a taxable brokerage account. And I call it a Freedom Fund. And the reason we call it a Freedom Fund is it gives you the freedom to retire whenever you want. You might want to retire at 55 years old, but all your money's in a 401k or an IRA. And in order to take money out of your 401k or IRA under the age of 59 and a half, you have to use the rule of 55 or a 72T. And you might not want to use either of those rules. Your 401k company might not allow that, or you might not want to do a 72T on your IRAs. So how do you retire early? With a Freedom Fund. So what we're going to do is we're going to put the money into a Freedom Fund, a taxable brokerage account, and all we're going to do is take that money and position it towards the market. You see, investing is really simple. It's not about picking specific stocks and getting in and out of sectors and watching Fast Money on CNBC and making all these trades. It's about positioning your money based on your time horizon, your risk tolerance. So for her, we know we've got about 10 plus years of work. So we need to position her retirement assets for growth. We need to put those in low cost, indexed ETFs and position those for the best growth that we possibly can. As she gets closer to retirement, we're going to shift those assets still within low-cost indexed ETFs. We're going to shift them more towards conservative. And so it's not about trying to say, I'm going to buy this stock, buy that stock, short this stock, short that stock. It's about positioning of retirement assets. So from 55 to 65, if we put in $60,000 a year plus our $584 that we've continuing to do into our IRA, at the end of 10 years, earning 6% on our investments, meaning the money going into the market is earning 6% a year, we're going to have $1.2 million in retirement savings at 65. That's a big jump. Look at this, from 150 to 1.2 million. Now we are earning 6%. And the reason I use 6%, that's a pretty conservative number. The stock market's averaged about 12% the last 10 years. It's averaged 10% the last 50 years. And if you add in inflation, it's averaged about 8%. So we're going to go 2% behind in the inflation market and say we're going to earn 6% a year. Hey, If we earn 8, 10, or 12, this number is going to be a lot better, but I don't want to project that, right? That's crazy. Let's project a little bit more conservative. So at 65, we're going to have $1.2 million. That's a huge gain. Remember, it's compound interest. It's consistently investing, saving, contributing, and investing. It's consistency. You don't get anywhere in life unless you're consistent. And compound interest is God's greatest gift outside of Jesus. And so we want to use God's greatest gift outside of Jesus to our advantage. So $1.2 million in retirement savings. Now, once we get to 65, our expenses have inflated to $6,870. So now we've got to start using this money, this $1.2 million, and we got to take this out per month. $6,870 to live off of. Remember, we have a mortgage payment in there, and we also have other expenses that are inflating at 3%. The mortgage is not inflating, but the other expenses are. We're going to get 6% in the market, and 3% is our inflation, okay? From 65 to 67, our investments go from $1.2 million to basically the same thing, $1.2 million. And the reason we're going from 65 to 67 is because at 67, we're kicking on that Social Security of $3,000 a month. Now, I get a lot of comments, hey, Drew, why don't you put COLA increases on Social Security? I don't like to do it on the board. I don't like to put COLA increases until we are actually claiming Social Security benefits. It's just me being conservative. Again, I'm always going to be more conservative in my planning because I don't want to get to retirement with a client and be surprised. So we'd rather be conservative. So we've got $1.2 million at 67. We need $7,289 per month in retirement income. Our Social Security is $3,000 a month, which means $4,289 is what we have to pull out of our retirement investment. So we're basically using a retirement income strategy to pull out $4,289 per month. What that looks like is different per individual. As we're getting older in Jessica's life, we're probably transitioning the money. Again, we're transitioning it from growth to more conservative. And so if we need to guarantee some income, we're going to have Social Security. We might use an annuity to guarantee some income. We might be shifting towards fixed income, dividend stocks. It just depends on what the client's risk tolerance is and what they're trying to accomplish and how we can do that with the current environment. So 67 to 77, our money grows from 1.2 to 1.3 million. Okay, now that's earning 6% a year. At 77, we've got $1.3 million. We need to take out $9,795 a month for expenses. Social Security's grown to $3,870. So this is your Social Security, this is our expenses, and this is our income. So now we need $5,925 per month coming out of our retirement assets, which at 87 puts us at $1.1 million. And at 99 years old, we're at zero, okay? So essentially, we've gone from $150,000 at 55, sacrificed, saved, invested, contributed to retirement accounts, and at 99, we have $0. We have a $782,000 paid off home because remember, we had a 30-year mortgage. So at some point, we could always sell this home. Now, Jessica lives here in the Tampa Bay area, so hopefully property values continue to rise as people continue to come to Florida, the land of the free. No taxes here. Actually, there's taxes, just no income tax. There's a state, there is a property tax, and there are sales tax. That makes up for the income tax. Now, so we have a home that we can obviously sell, we can reverse mortgage, we can whatever if we need to. Now, here's what I want you to think about. Keep in mind, we're using a 6% rate of return. If we lower this rate of return, it's going to lower these asset values. But what we're trying to see here now, once we've got it on the board, and once we've got it kind of figured out on the board, like, yeah, we can do this, now we take this from the board and we put it into the financial EKG software, which starts to take into account monthly inflation, taxes, all different kinds of things. We get more detailed, more granular in our planning so that whatever we're missing on the board, we now have in the software. And hey, if you want your financial EKG, look in the description below and we can put together a financial plan for you to get you to retirement, through retirement and protect your ability to stay in retirement. Hey, thank you so much for watching. God bless. Bye-bye.